Before I dive into this album review, I just want to make a quick announcement that I have activated the memberships on this page. So if you didn't want to support me through Patreon, but you still want to support me a little bit financially, that would be great. You can do it through the YouTube membership. I've left the information, I believe. There's like a little button that you can click, and there's like 3 tiers. So yeah, I hope you will consider it. There's no pressure or obligation. What I will say is one of the perks is that I film a lot of these videos kind of all at once, edit them all at once, and then schedule them out so that I don't like completely, flood your subscription boxes. But for those of you that want to see them all at once, they won't be scheduled. It will just like all of a sudden you'll see like 5, 6 videos all at once that you can binge all at the same time and enjoy it that way. So you won't have to wait. As well as I believe once a month, I want to start doing these kind of like live stream hangouts where you guys suggest music to me and I'll listen to it, get you, that first kind of immediate thought. And it's just kind of going to be like a little bit of a hangout. So yeah, I'm going to try this for a little bit. And I think for the hangouts, I'll also invite anybody that has supported me through Patreon. So don't worry about my patrons. I still want to give you guys some premium access to all those kinds of things. So you will automatically be invited to those live stream hangouts. And yeah, it's just something a little bit fun. So just thought I'd give you that right up from the get-go. Let's dive into an album that I have been hoping will be good. So let's just dive into it. Melodies of Atonement by Leprous. So Leprous at this point, I don't really think needs an introduction. They have risen the ranks of being one of the most prominent prog metal outfits on the landscape currently. They kind of got their start in the very early 2000s, hailing from Norway as kind of like the tech extreme prog metal. And one of the things that I really, really appreciated from these boys is their use of atmosphere and their use of soundscaping, and infusing that with this punch, this drive, this energy that really hasn't been matched at this point. Like I always kind of point to Leprous as being the originator of this kind of a sound that a lot of bands have tried to emulate or tried to replicate. And up until this point, I only think that Leprous is the main mark to beat. And I gotta say, their first 5 albums, everything from Aeolia, I think is always how you pronounce it, all the way into The Congregation with Tall Poppy Syndrome, Bilateral, and Cole, staples. Absolute staples of progressive metal. And each one holds something very personal, something very touching, something very exciting to the prog metal. And I always think like each one gets better and better and better and better and better, which is really saying something since Tall Poppy Syndrome really hit hard, Since then, starting with Melina, I just feel as if they've been treading water. They've been playing it safe. They, instead of trying to break the mold and experiment and try different things, I just feel as if they're playing in the same sandbox without really doing anything new or exciting or different. And at first with Melina, that was what was interesting about it. It was a little bit more somber. It was a little bit more introspective. I like some of the softer, melancholical moments on that record, but it still kind of held a little bit of that punch aspect to it. Then when we got to Pitfalls and Aphelion, I just didn't feel as invested or as immediate about those records. And I still struggle with them. Like even though Pitfalls, Aphelion, and even Melina have moments on those albums that I really enjoy from start to finish, it can be a little bit of a slog. So it was with Melodies of Atonement that I've been cautiously optimistic over. There have been moments on this where I'm just like, okay, are we going to get a return to form or are we going to get more of the same? And I think we get a little bit of both. With the 3 singles that came from this album, Atonement, Silently Walking Alone, and Like a Sunken Ship, we're getting an overall flavor of this record. It's a little bit more aggressive. Anar is there screaming again. It's the first time he screamed from them since the Congregation, and so we're getting a little bit more of that raw energy. We're getting a little bit more of that sharp edges that I've really been loving within Leprous. And within that, we get kind of the signature sound of this record, which is the soft opening that gradually builds into a very satisfying crescendo and a very satisfying oomph that then gets played out, and then we get into a little bit of a play out of the track that then bleeds into the next track. And that is where we're getting a kind of a playing it safe, because for a lot of these tracks, it's very much rinse and repeat for a lot of these tracks. So hearing Silent Lily Walking Away, Atonement, and Like a Sunken Ship, you've basically heard the rest of this album, unfortunately. Take, for example, the third track of My Spectre, where, again, it's very somber at the beginning. It's just kind of soundscapes within the keyboards. You know, it's very Leprous in that sense. And then we got an initial crescendo that kind of wakes us all up from this little bit of a daze, then brings us back down again. And Anar is doing something very interesting where the actual like rhythm sequences and the the guts of this track are just this bow, 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 bow. Like it's very driven, it's very rhythmic, but not very fast. And Anar is up there in his usual whoa, whoa, but it doesn't quite work for me. Like I feel as if that is something that you want to use with something that's very energetic and something that kind of builds up the pace and you want to get up and go. Instead, it just kind of feels like this kind of funeral dirge where, you know, it's kind of this last grasp of air being like, come on, we can do it. Let's get to the next aspect of it. And I don't know, it kind of brought me out of the track a little bit, being like, okay, Anar is sounding really great. Like this is some of the best vocal works that I've heard from Anar in a very, very long time. You know, he's channeling what he was doing last year with 16, and he's bringing his performance to the next level. But unfortunately, what he's bringing to the table doesn't quite match the energy. So after the powerhouse of a track of Like a Sunken Ship that features Anar screaming once again, I really enjoy that kind of powerhouse that he's able to command. You know, this is the another artist that kind of hasn't screamed or growled for a while that's coming back, with Michael Eichelfeld doing the same with Opeth. You know, at least it's a little bit more engaging. Like each of these tracks after Limbo is trying to do something really interesting with the soundscapes. I do feel like Limbo is a little bit overdrawn, a little bit I'm not all that engaged with it, but like a track like Faceless has this groove to it. It has this bounce, this very infectious and energetic rhythm section. It's just like, okay, we're back. Let's go. That's continued with Starlight, but again, once we get to Starlight, the formula of all these tracks begins to get a little bit bland. It's like, okay, we got a soft start, a big crescendo, a big meaty, you know, moment in the middle, a little bit of a come down and then back up again. And I was just waiting for something different to appear. You know, I at least enjoy some of the sounds, some of the textures, but I'm not hearing like a signature moment on any of these tracks. I mean, even with the ninth track of Self-Satisfied Lullaby, where they're trying something a little bit different with a little bit more of an electronic beat, you know, it's feeling something like Muse was doing back with the Simulation Theory, where you got that very rhythmic, syncopated techno styles, but it's never like immediate or aggressive or anything along those lines. Again, I was just waiting for something to happen, and I never really felt like anything was really going. I will at least say that the last track of Unfree My Soul goes out with a pretty big bang, and I like the kind of harp aspect of it that they're playing, either through a harp or with an electric guitar. I really like that they're at least trying something different. There's something a little bit more immediate with this track, and it goes out on a rather high note. But that being said, I don't know. I felt like this album was both engaging me, but also kind of leaving me wanting more. I'm kind of torn about this one. Like, I definitely enjoyed my time with this one a little bit more than Pitfalls or Aphelion, but I never felt as engaged as some of the bigger tracks. Like, what I will say is, like, Aphelion and Pitfalls had moments on there that I think hit harder, but from start to finish, I think this is a stronger and better album. So take that as you will. I still think we are streets away from the big high highs of Bilateral and the Congregation. At this point, I'm not holding my breath to have a Leprous album be that good again. But maybe the band will surprise me. Unfortunately, we're still not quite there with this one, but I think this was a very solid and very applaudable attempt, is what I'll say. Yeah, I think for my final rating of this album, I think I'll finally say Melodies of Atonement by Leprous is one that I would ultimately stream. I think if you're a fan of Leprous and you really enjoy this style of music, you're going to love this record. I don't think that this one will disappoint the fans, and I don't think that this will disappoint the casual listener either. I do think that it will leave some people wanting more, and if they are, I would recommend checking out King Crow's album Hopium that came out last week. That album I actually enjoy a lot more than this one, and it's kind of doing the same thing but doing it in a little bit of a better way. So I would actually recommend checking out King Crow's record over this one, but if I wouldn't necessarily pass up on this one either. I do think that this one is, it's one to be listened to, and I think that there's still something very special about this record, but I think I'm going to be putting this in the same box that I put Pitfalls and the Aphelion and even Melinda, where it's a good Leprous album, but it's not necessarily a great Leprous album. So there you go. That's my thoughts of Melodies of Atonement for Leprous. What do you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And once again, I want to shout out my Patreon, which you can find the link down below, as well as, if Patreon's not quite your bag, if you don't really like using a third-party site, totally understandable. I've set up the memberships on here, so you've got the 3 tiers. Anything would be amazing, but I also understand this is a tough time for a lot of people. I should know I'm getting married in like 2.5 weeks, so money might be a little tight for you guys, and I totally understand it. So it's not an obligation, it's merely a suggestion. If you wanted to support me, that's the way that you can do it. So I'm going to leave you with that, and I'm going to leave you with thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.